on IT, getting a sense of the macro demand. So we've got a corporate conversation with Happiest Minds. Now, the company's founder and promoter, Ashok Soota, has sold a 1% stake in the company in a block deal yesterday. It was valued at 115 crore. What he has said in the press release is that he plans to maintain his shareholding at a minimum of 40%. Currently, he has close to about 50% in the company. It's not that he's saying he will go down to 40%, but he has said it will never go below 40%. But we also want to talk to the company about their M&A plans and even Accenture's guidance, right? Just a 0 to 2% organic revenue guidance for the current year. What does it spell for the Indian IT companies? We're now joined by Venkat Raman Narayanan, Managing Director and Okay, oops, we've lost that connection with Venkat of Happiest Minds. But just to quickly give the context, Happiest Minds was 6 months back anticipating a very strong growth this year of about, 20-25%. But this was predicated on the company closing certain acquisitions. They did a QIP of 500 crores for that acquisition, but that acquisition hasn't yet closed out, which is why what they said in Q1, so that's about 2 months back in August, is that we will revise our full year guidance based on whether that M&A closes. What will be the extent of the inorganic contribution? So I think that's also going to be something that we will chat with the management. Here's what we'll do. We'll get into a break. We'll come back and try and connect with Happiest Minds Technology. We'll also get a handle on what's happening in commodities. Stay tuned. Welcome back. As promised, we've managed to connect with Venkat of Happiest Minds to talk more about the stake sale that we saw from Ashok Soota of 1.1% yesterday, and even the outlook on the IT companies based on what Accenture had to tell us. Venkat, thank you very much for joining in. First, can you outline Mr. Soota's plans? He currently he sold 1.1% stake for his other NGO social sector interests. He has a 50.1% stake in the company, and he's okay if the company's stake comes down to 40%. He just doesn't want it to go below 40%. So does he have plans to bring it down further because he has so many other interests? Any timeline that he shared on that?
Good morning, Reema. Thanks for giving those numbers. Ashok doesn't have any fixed time frame within which it comes down to 40%. It's one of the pillars of the design for perpetuity formula that we put in place, which is ownership. And ownership should not fall below 40%. That's what we have said. For example, when we did the QIP, he got diluted by about 1.8%. So as the company grows, the dilution or reduction in ownership percentages by percentage points. As we raise capital or as we buy large companies, or there can be many other circumstances. Along with that, he would also be selling a few percentage points, like you recently saw with the transaction, to fund his non-governmental, altruistic other objectives that he has in place.
But he would be selling his stake to the tune of a few percentage points.
Both. When the company raises capital, he'll get diluted. And also he would be raising additional funds for his activities, which is related to the not-for-profit venture that he has, which will be another maybe 1% or 2% whenever the time is not required, nothing in the immediate.
Okay, all right. Venkataraman, good morning. That's about the stake sale that happened yesterday, but we also got a big update overnight, and that's Accenture reporting numbers. Muted showing the organic growth guidance was at 0 to 3%, outsourcing was in mid to high single digits. But in their guidance, they said there is no significant improvement in discretionary spends. That's what they're assuming. Can you give us a sense of how the industry dynamics have been in quarter 2, and what is the outlook looking like?
Quarter 1, we did reasonably well, 3.5% of sequential growth and year-over-year growth, 15% year-over-year. So if you look at that, compared to the commentary that we have heard from Accenture, we have done significantly better than them. And maybe if that's what they are talking for the industry, significantly better than the industry. Going into Q2, we get into the silent period starting Monday, but given where we stand, we have not done any acquisition, but despite that, we should be having a reasonably good performance in line with what we have been giving out to the markets, similar to even Q1.
Is Q2 better than Q1 for you?
I would hold on from answering that because we get onto a silent period starting Monday. Today is the quarter end, but we are doing reasonably well. Is what I would like to say at this juncture. We'll come back to the markets with how we've done for Q2 and how we look for the rest of the year. But if we even perform as well as what we have done in Q1, we were one of the top performers on organic growth because we haven't made that acquisition that we have been planning for, and hopefully Q3, Q4 we should be able to close one or two. But without that, I think we are putting up a reasonable performance.
So Q2 you've done reasonably well, and you're hopeful of one or two acquisitions closing in Q3 and Q4. And on discretionary spend, is there a pickup in the last 3 months versus what we've seen in the prior 6 months, or is it status quo?
It's almost, I would say, status quo because there is that wait and watch that's happening, Rima. Because things are changing quite rapidly. People are taking it on a quarterly basis, but we are continuing to see new logos, signups, and additional contract bookings. That's happening as we speak. But ramp up is taking slightly longer than maybe what we expected.
Okay, all right. So ramp up is taking slightly more time than what was expected. The other thing that Accenture said in their results is that they got around $200 million of revenues from generative AI in this quarter. You have partnered with Microsoft. Have revenues started trickling in, or it will take a while before we see that happening with Indian IT companies?
It will take a little while before we start actually, calling out that number. Because we have to identify what's really coming from generative AI. It's a pure service offering versus what is the follow-through that we get from an account into which we go and sell into generative AI. So just like it can be, we need to get a quantification going on that. But in the meanwhile, many of our customers have already started projects on integrating generative AI, OpenAI capabilities in the platforms that we're building for them, or the digital transformation exercises that we are undertaking for them. So that's in place. Give us a quarter. We'll come back with a more cogent response to quantification and kind of investments, because people talk about investments, people talk about people. Companies are talking about, IP. So all of that, we are putting it together, getting together the cogent story, maybe even putting a business unit together, and then give us that time to come back to you with the POV. But in the meanwhile, you're not sitting back. There's lots of work happening on existing customers with generative AI capabilities being sold or implemented.
You raised 500 crores via that QIP. These one or two acquisitions that you're hopeful of closing in the second half of the year, how much of the cash will you be able to utilize? Or after we see, say, 2 acquisitions, do you have the firepower to close another acquisition, say, in FY25 in the first half?
So, Rima, to put the whole cash generation in context, 500 through QIP, we have raised about 135 crores through an NCD raise. We've got about another 500 crores to 600 crores on our books as free cash.
Yeah.
And internal accruals of about 200 crores a year. So, we look at it on a collective basis, and that gives us the firepower. If for the right acquisition, if we have to raise capital, we will do that, but that may be in the future. But right now, we have what we have in place. We can do the 1 or 2 acquisitions that we are aspiring to do or targeting to do.
Any more details on the size of these acquisitions? Because you're clearly in talks with them right now. It seems to have reached, a finalish stage. Let me put it like that.
I'm sure we'll come back to give that happy news first. But, there are, like I've been saying, we've got about 2 to 3 names in the pipeline in various stages of discussion. We have not signed up anything, and how these things, they are binary. If it breaks down, talks break down, you are left with nothing. But mostly, if it goes well, you have the acquisition and the sign up happens. So it's kind of binary. Wish us well, and we hope to come back to you with some good news soon enough.
Okay, all right. So speak to us first up after those updates come by as well. Thank you, Venkat, so much for joining us and taking us through this update and a lot more that's happening in the industry as well. That's the word coming in from Happiest Minds.